Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A brief introduction while our speakers get seated. This session is in fact inspired by a major new initiative at the World Economic Forum, also called the Future of Production. And we would love to have you more engaged in that work. So please do let us know after the session if you'd like to be involved. The initiative addresses how we make things. And by that, we don't just mean manufacturing, we also mean the entire chain of activities from extraction through manufacturing to the consumer and beyond. And that chain is going to be transformed by new technologies. Everything from 3D printing to robotics to IoT to wearables, you name it. That's going to have major implications for the innovation capacity of nations, for employment, for sustainability. And how are we getting ready to shape that? So at the World Economic Forum, we kicked off a piece of work just this last year, and it's probably one of the fastest pieces of work growing that I've ever seen at the forum, with now 26 ministers of commerce, including the Minister Miao Wei of MIIT here in China, 26 others, including all G20 countries, excluding 2. Also 42 companies from around the world, and we're thrilled because they're answering key questions like how can we ensure that technologies are further diffused? How can we ensure flexible lifelong learning in production? How can we meet our sustainability challenges? And so that was a brief introduction to say that there is much more beyond this conversation. I can't think of a better guide to the conversation than Erica. She's Professor of Engineering and Public Policy all the way from Carnegie Mellon in the US. She's been involved heavily in the US's policy around manufacturing over the years, and in a piece of work between US and China in 2016 as well. A wonderful companion to speak on any long journey, as we know from Dubai, and a member of our Global Future Council. So you're in very safe hands with this conversation. Thank you for joining us today. Please keep engaged. Over to you.
So it's my honor to be here today and to be looking around the room at everyone here. The last 2 decades have seen a dramatic shift in the location of production from industrialized nations to industrializing ones, where that's been driven not just by production moving, but also the location of demand moving as well, particularly rising exponentially in China. So today, not only are 1 in 4 automobiles produced in China, also they're consumed in China as well. So at the same time, we've seen a dramatic shift in the technology landscape, as noted by Professor Klaus Schwab, talking about Industry 4.0. So this threatens to once again upend the global production distribution and the winners and losers therein. So this creates challenges both for industry as well as for national and industrial policy, everything from what is the infrastructure and institutions that will enable continuous innovation, as well as what is the future of work, how do we prepare people for that future, and even as we tackle all of these already complex issues, how do we deal with the rising global climate change and sustainability therein. So with that in mind, we could not have a better set of speakers here today on our panel. They will talk to us both about the tensions and the synergies in these issues, but also how they've been taking on these issues in the real world on the ground today. So it's my delight to introduce, we have Neil Hawkins, the Chief Sustainability Officer and Corporate Vice President of Dow Chemical with us today. We have Minister Sim Ann, who is, Minister Sim Ann, my bad, who is the Trade and Industry Minister for Singapore. We also have Vishal Sikka, the Chief Executive Officer of Infosys for the USA and on the International Business Council, and Zhang, the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of RoboTerra USA and a young global leader with the World Economic Forum. So with this panel, just so that we're hoping to draw from this incredible expertise we have here in the round table up front, but also from all of your questions and the expertise that sits here within the room. So just to help us understand who is in the room with us here today, I have 2 icebreaker questions before we kick off. The first is, how many of you, by raise of hands, come from industry? Okay. So about 1/3 the room. We'll give that 1/3 to 1/2. All right, great. How many from government? Some, okay. Okay, great. And how many of you are from nonprofits or journalists, other forms of organizations? Great, great. Okay. I think you've self-grouped over there. Perfect. So in starting off our panel today, the first question that I wanted to ask our panelists as we go around, and maybe we'll start with Neil and move to the left through the group, is if you could talk a bit about in your organizations, your industry in your case, in Dow Chemical, where do you stand today with respect to new technologies, the regulation and economic realities thereof, as well as how you're addressing sustainability with those industrial solutions?
Well, first off, I should mention Dow is a leading material science company, and as such, we're at the heart of really dozens, if not hundreds, of value chains. So there's very few parts of any economy that we don't touch or couldn't touch. And then when you step further back into that, we're a research-based material science company. So we're spending about $2 billion a year on research of new materials and new processes. I mention that because new materials are clearly part of the new economy, the fourth industrial revolution. And we have to have a successful business model serving virtually all parts of the economy at the same time. So being very close to customers and consumers and people who actually use products to understand their needs or anticipate their needs is very important. I want to also mention from a sustainability point of view, there are many things happening in value chains today that are important. Climate change, water related. But I think the thing I would mention there too is circular economy and concepts around designing for circularity. This is something we work with many of our customers and their customers, because you have to design products and processes ahead of time to assure that they can be recycled. And we've done a lot of that in food packaging, where we've devised and invented many different types of polyethylene that have many different characteristics, but they can all be recycled. The other thing, so circular economy is a big design concept across many value chains. The other is the interface with nature. And I think that this is something we've focused on and we've worked with others on, but it's an area that we need to all pay more attention to as materials are extracted, converted, made into products, and then go back into back into a waste cycle if they're not recycled. Making sure that we're maximizing nature's value to people and to the planet is really an important concept. So circular economy, that requires design, but also really conserving nature so that we get the power and economic value from nature that we all need.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much. Vishal, if you could talk to us a bit about where you are today technologically and how that interacts with regulation and also the future of work and employment, that would be wonderful.
So I think in terms of the way production is changing, there is obviously a very fundamental way in which digital technology is making its way into production, into things. And we, as a part of the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about the Internet of Things and so forth. But the material implication of that, and I say material in two ways there, is that computing becomes a much more integrated part of physical things, medicines and devices of every sort all have small computers now inside these already. So that has a huge impact on the way we manufacture. And increasingly, it is a given that computing is a part of the physical world. But in fact, if you look at the success of many companies recently, we have to sort of even we have to go further than even that and flip the perspective towards thinking of computers in the shape of these things rather than these things with computing inside them. And I think that is becoming a huge part of what is going on. And that, of course, means not only a change in what we do, but also fundamental changes in how we do these things. So the processes, the manufacturing processes, the processes of making are becoming very different. They are much more iterative, much more integrated. Up here, we have a space that we have built together with your school,
Yes.
Erica, with the making space for making robots, and that is from Mila's Maker Lab. And it's a wonderful example of how the new ways of making are much more rapid, much more agile, much more iterative, much more experimentative based on design thinking. So I think it is safe to say that production is changing fundamentally in what is made and how it is made as a result of the deep adoption of computing and communication into everything that we do.
Yes.
And I think the regulatory impact of that is going to be massive, and that is something that we have to work on.
Great, wonderful. Zhang, if we could go on to the activities that you're undertaking, what are the technologies that you're bringing to the table, and also how might that interact with the future of work?
Yeah, in some way, RoboTerra was almost a child of all those underlying technological changes. So we are a startup. We're just about 4 years old, working in consumer robotics with a focus now for the educational sector. So we have R&D in both the modularized hardware and also software. As a startup, we aim to bring good technologies in learning to global markets. So I think the reason we're able to do that is really because, on the one hand, we see that worldwide, many countries, governments, or families in all those societies actually want to have good technologies for their children, for their campuses. For example, learning through robots to let kids master the contents or knowledge traditionally taught in a more test-driven way, all the STEM fields, science, engineering, mathematics, etc. But because of the smart manufacturing on small scales, fast prototyping, because of those technologies developing very fast, so the startup cost has been dramatically decreased. So for us, even as a startup, we are able to work with vendors or manufacturers who actually provide fast prototyping services so that we don't need to begin with, for example, billions of R&D dollars in order to be able to bring some new products with physical forms. We don't have to invest so heavily at the beginning. On the other hand, because of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 and this trend, everyone is seeing that the future employment needs more talents with STEM skill sets. So schools nowadays have to emphasize on this to prepare children for the future labor market opportunities. So that opens up opportunities for startups like us. What are the innovative things we can bring to the educational sector so that even today there are not so many teachers who are able to understand both engineering, robotic structures, or programming, but because of the technology, we're still able to bring the solutions to the schools, the campuses, that they can still let their children, the students, to learn about those skills so that they are prepared. Yeah, so on that note, we're really enjoying those opportunities opened up because of the underlying development of both manufacturing, fast prototyping, and also in some way the fact that startups can also tap on global talent market, that we can hire the best talents worldwide so that our products are really designed for all users worldwide, not just for a small group of people from a small region. So that also means global opportunities for a small company as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Minister Sim Ann, if you could talk to us a bit about where Singapore is as a leader with such low unemployment and such incredible participation in the global production economy. Where are you today, both in terms of technologies, especially with small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as with addressing the future of work?
Well, in Singapore, I would say we see no alternative to embracing the changes that we're now seeing take place in the world of production, and in terms of reshaping what it means to make things. Many of you might know Singapore as a small, open trading nation, and I would like to put forth a few reasons why, for us, embracing these new trends is so important. The first one is geographical, second one is demographic, and the third one is aspirational. In terms of our geographical constraints, I think this is something that people who've been to Singapore would feel immediately. So we have land constraints, and if you think about traditional methods of production, of manufacturing, that's one very big disadvantage that we have. In fact, most people would know Singapore as a trading nation, perhaps not so much as manufacturing. But we value a diversified economy. We have 20% of our GDP in manufacturing. That's very important to us. And it accounts for 14% of the jobs in our economy. So if, with the new changes, we're talking about methods of production, advanced manufacturing, that really is very efficient and in many cases takes up very little land, I think this is very good news for our companies, and that, I think, in large part explains why many of our companies are very enthusiastic about adopting a lot of these new technologies. Second reason, demographic. We have a small population, and it's also aging. So looking at where productivity is going to come from is a very important, a very absorbing question for us. Again, we see in advanced manufacturing the answer to that question. Third, I would say aspirational. We have a very educated workforce, very connected to global trends, and ideas flow very quickly into Singapore. And we want, I think, to give very good opportunities for our startups, for new brands to be built. And again, advanced manufacturing and many of these new technologies afford us the ability for entrepreneurs to realize their dreams in Singapore despite our constraints. And also, we're very highly urbanized. And in seeking further solutions to bring about better urban living conditions, again, I think this opens up many fields for innovation, for collaboration. Also, just now you mentioned sustainability, Erica, and that's very important to us too, because we are very limited in terms of natural resources. Some of you may be familiar with Singapore's attempts at addressing the shortage of water. So the concerns about sustainability, I would say, is very much hardwired in our society. And in terms of making use of new technologies that allow us to pursue sustainability goals, I think this is very much in line with our push towards development and also providing good jobs for our people.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you. So if we could take a moment, very brief statements from each of you, maybe under a minute, so a few sentences. Just if you were going to wow the audience about where you see the future in your organizations in the next 10 to 15 years, what's that vision, even if it's one specific anecdote that you see? Where are we all going?
Well, I think the key thing is collaboration. And for all of these different value chain examples, if you want advanced manufacturing, you have to have advanced materials. Let me give you an example. Lightweighting of vehicles. We work with virtually every auto company on the planet lightweighting vehicles. And why is a chemical company the key to doing that? It's because we've invented adhesives that allow aluminum, steel, and plastic to be melded together with the strength of a metal weld. And that allows more use of advanced plastics and advanced aluminums. So that's a good example. Another one, Minister Sim brought up water. Dow has worked very hard through a research-based program to improve RO membranes. And we've actually reduced the energy consumption per liter by 30%. So dramatically reducing the carbon footprint of desalination potentially in that application. And it's been through collaboration with Singapore and others. So I think the key word is collaboration, really working together to invent the materials that are needed in these value chains, and then scaling up together. Because whether you're an entrepreneur, a state, or Dow, we all want to scale together, invent together, scale together.
Yeah, beautiful. Vish, what is the future, 10 to 15 years from now, that Infosys will be bringing to us?
Billions of entrepreneurs. Billions of entrepreneurs. Of course, this is at a much smaller scale. We are working on this at Infosys. When you look at all these large, scary trends put together, the rapid advance in AI, the already existing ability of AI technologies to do things, our fast-moving things, even better than humans can, and so forth, that points to a dramatic improvement in our education, in bringing these new skills to people at a very, very large scale. And the timelines involved in that are going to be long. They're not going to be short. We have a massive gap in bringing digital technology to the masses, to the people. So that will take a few decades to get to the point where there is a large enough coverage in education. And when you think about that, you also realize in that time, AI technology will obviously further advance. It is advancing exponentially. And so what do you do when you know that a few decades out? So my own sense is that the long-term future involves assuming that any problem that can be mechanically articulated, that can be specified, that can be described, is going to be solved automatically. So the human frontier really is going to be innovation, it's going to be creativity, it is going to be looking at the world around us and seeing what is not there. Yes. So developing a sense for seeing what is not there. And that is really entrepreneurship that is making. And so I don't see any alternative but to have billions of makers among us. At a smaller scale in Infosys, we get to see the effects of this shift earlier, because we are seeing the duality of automation taking away many of the jobs of yesterday at a remarkable pace. And at the same time, we see a tremendous need for new kinds of jobs, for new kinds of skills. We are hiring tens of thousands of people in these new areas. And so we are seeing that play out at a smaller scale. But the same thing is going to happen broadly in the entire planet. And the only answer to that is education. The only answer to that is a very widespread adoption of a culture of making, yes. In my sense.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So 10 to 15 years from now, what's the future from RoboTerra's perspective?
Yeah. Vishal, as the industry leader in tech and Valley, he has a lot of insights. He basically said everything I want to say. However, right, as a small startup like us, like RoboTerra, of course, we have our difference as well. Number one is we only existed in this world less than 4 years, right? So for a startup, only 6 months matters. You can do things and see, think about things 6 months and then 12 months and then beyond, because things are really happening very fast. So I wanted to mention actually 2 time points, because you're asking about 10 years or 15 years. 10 years ago, right, if we look at the phone in our hands, 10 years ago is the time Steve Jobs actually first time announced iPhone to the world. Mm-hmm. And we all know what happened in this past 10 years. Because of the work of many, many indeed makers, people with the entrepreneurial spirits, makers, designers, who actually made all the apps based on those ecosystems for the Apple or Android or other systems, and really brought all the technology based on mobile technology to our lives. So specifically for education, of course, there are many, many applications in education as well. So for RoboTerra, we believe that innovations are happening exponentially, and standing at this point with this foreseeable replacement of AI and robots to do the dangerous and repetitive work, so that humans have to be, humans have to focus on what we are good at, which is indeed the human spirit, creativity. So for RoboTerra, our team, with a group of our engineers from hardware, software, cognitive scientists, we got together because we have this shared belief in human creativity, and we see robotic technology being the combination of basically all the developments in tools, and tools are to empower human creativity. So this is our belief, and based on this belief, for the upcoming 15 years, so we're seeing everything's happening exponentially. One example, besides this, past 10 years, how the phone changed this world, NASA said, 2030, boots on Mars. So that means for any high schoolers today in the world, when they are 30-something, when they are doing professional jobs, there will already be human settlements on Mars as well, looking back. There will be many new jobs, even we couldn't even imagine today. Just like 10 years ago, we don't really know much about product management as a key profession. So as a startup, we stay humble about the uncertainties of the future, but we stay positive. So we just keep innovating and innovate fast. That's our way of looking at this.
Great, yeah. Great. So to finish with Singapore, can you talk about what does Singapore see as the future 10 to 15 years from now in terms of the production system, but also perhaps about your program, Skills Future, and how that's training people for that future?
Certainly. I think we share a broadly similar vision about the benefits that a lot of these technologies can bring. But I think for government, the eye has to be on implementation and in terms of rollout, because I think that really makes the big difference as to whether or not the vision is able to come to fruition. So to take sort of manufacturing again as an example, in Singapore's case, we adopt a multi-pronged strategy to realize this vision of vibrant companies and many good jobs for our people. So first, I think there has to be continued and sustained investment in terms of innovation and in terms of research. So this is what we're doing. We have a Research, Innovation and Enterprise Fund, of which about 3.2 billion Singapore dollars is devoted to advanced manufacturing. We also work with leading companies to bring in and anchor many of their cutting-edge projects in Singapore. So we have a Dream Factory project that was embarked upon by Seagate, where they explore the first fully automated hard disk manufacturing facility. We also have Siemens, which has been using Singapore as a base to do digital manufacturing design consultancy, and we hope that will then allow for more purpose-built advanced manufacturing facilities to take shape in Singapore. At the same time, we have to support our SMEs because while at the frontier, a lot of exciting things are happening, but if those innovations don't cascade to our SMEs or to companies that are sort of within the frontier, then I think you're not going to see the broad-based productivity growth that so many societies hope to achieve. So in terms of interacting with our SMEs, in terms of helping them, we have a range of programs. We support them in terms of adopting digitalization and automation. We pair our scientific research agencies with SMEs so that there can be a flow of talent to the SMEs and good ideas. We also help them do what we call operations and technology road mapping to sit down with specific companies and to figure out, in order to achieve their production plans, in order to achieve the revenue that they target, what sort of technology do they need to factor in or incorporate. And this, I think, in a nutshell, describes the multi-pronged approach that we're taking. Then we complement that with Skills Future, which Erica, you have mentioned. And Skills Future, what it does is that it works together with our education system to foster a culture of lifelong learning. And it is a package of many measures. Well, first of all, many people know about the Skills Future credit, which is a sum of $500 given to every adult Singaporean for the purpose of learning. But it doesn't stop there. We have Skills Future awards for people who wish to gain greater proficiency in their specific professional areas. We have Skills Future Earn and Learn, which is an apprenticeship program that links students to vacancies in the workplace and which allows them to be familiarized with the needs of industry. I could go on, but I think what we try to do is to be very flexible and innovative in terms of policy implementation so that the visions sketched out by entrepreneurs, by industry, can then be realized, can be implemented throughout the economy as much as we can.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we've heard so far about how advanced materials can be essential to end innovations to a circular type of economy and also to reducing our carbon footprint. We've also heard about the importance of collaboration with government in creating those types of solutions. And then we've likewise heard about how technology is changing what the future of work may be, the future of employment, and opportunities for skills retraining and upgrading, whether that be in robotics or that be through government programs such as Skills Future. I want to, for a moment, turn it to our audience. So what I'd love to do is figure out common synergies across the panelists, but also opportunities across our audience for new innovations, for partnerships. How do we start to discuss across these areas? So if I could ask for, are there any one or two questions that you might look to pose to the panelists from the audience about this future? I'll just look around. So I have two here. And this side of the room is more eager. Okay, great. Sure. I don't know where a mic is. Okay.
Kiran Shah from Electronic City in Bangalore, India. And we are into electronics manufacturing. We've just started a completely robotic electronics manufacturing factory. And my question to the panel is that what I understand now with the whole automated factory, the costing is pretty much entirely labor-free. So manufacturing can move to any country in the world. So what is the changes you're going to see 10 years from now is that manufacturing will go back to closer to the consumer. And that is going to have an impact, which is far different than what we think. Currently, we feel that China is the only lowest cost. But what automation and robotics is doing is actually bringing cost neutral for everybody.
Okay, great. So hold there, and why don't we take the other question, and then we'll, so I think we have two more, and then we'll kind of go around, and one behind.
My question is to Sikka. Actually, my name is Zhang. I'm from ThoughtWorks, a technology service company, just like Infosys. So because in the future, just like what GE will become, every company will become a technology company. And as a technology service company like Infosys, what's your vision or position in a future world that every company, just like Mrs. Yao's company, they have their own technology service in-house. So how a company like Infosys can support the future new generation of technology company? Meanwhile, because Infosys is very large, and in the countries such as India and some other countries, the company like Infosys play an important role to incubate innovations. So how do you compare the innovations incubated by the large companies like Infosys and their entrepreneurs So how do you compare these two?
Okay.
Well, three wonderful questions. Should we start? Or?
Great. So yeah, why don't we take these two questions? And so I've got the sort of how will robots level the playing field in terms of across different countries? And then also the question with respect to Infosys versus RoboTerra and how innovation is happening in those contexts. Go ahead.
Maybe I can take a, so I think to your question about leveling the playing field, it's absolutely true that in many ways the playing field becomes leveled when we have automation. But then inevitably in these kinds of technologies, there are other factors that show up when we get there, and new kinds of laws of locality will emerge, and the availability of people who make the software that is automating the factory, the maintenance of that software and integration of that software, and where are those people sitting. And so there are derivative effects of every technological advance that are not immediately visible. I think this was also Zhang's point earlier, that we don't tend to see those up front. My own sense is that as you talked about the collaboration, the ability of people to work together and the ability of people to be in close proximity to each other, for example, in large cities, is something that is not going to change for the next many decades. And so as long as those kinds of laws of locality are around, they will form their own competitive advantages and so forth as the technology continues to evolve. And to your point about incubation, that is absolutely right. Unfortunately, generally, you don't see that much commercial incubation or commercially successful incubation coming out of large companies. We still haven't mastered that. Big companies still haven't mastered that art. I mean, if you just look at the turnover in the Fortune 500, it is very steep. 36 to 40% of, since the iPhone was introduced, something like 35 to 40% of the Fortune 500 have displaced their spot in the Fortune 500, which is an astonishing, acknowledgement of inability to innovate. As to your other question, which is a very profound one, about what do you do when everybody becomes a technology company? And that's an important question. My friend Sebastian Thrun recently made a comment that the going rate for an autonomous car engineer is about $10 million. He made this statement maybe 6 or 7 months ago. When you think about that, you realize that there are always cutting-edge technologies that are not yet in the public domain, that haven't yet reached scale, where there is a significant amount of value associated with that. We at Infosys continually bring whatever the skills of the next generation are to people at a large scale. So we have trained 150,000 people on design thinking, 30,000 people on artificial intelligence and things like this. So my own sense is that the core differentiation, which is independent of the rate of technological progress that we have, is the ability to bring the practical skills that are necessary in the world around us. And I think we are quite far from a time where every company is a technology company. There is no doubt that in order to succeed, every company needs to become a technology company. And hopefully that will happen in our lifetimes, and then we will have a good transformation to deal with to turn ourselves into an education company.
Great, beautiful. And then Neil, I know you wanted to comment, and then RoboTerra,
Okay.
Zhang, yeah.
One subcomponent to a question was getting manufacturing closer to consumers. And to some extent in the areas that we touch a lot, that really is all about 3D printing and that whole area. And there's a lot of promise in that area, but it's not being done on a large scale right now. Yes. and so we're going to need super advanced materials to go along with super advanced 3D printing. So I wanted to mention that, but that will be one trend. But the other trend, because of circularity, is that there's a tremendous amount of material that needs to be brought back and reused and repurposed. And there's a whole technology challenge, but also business opportunity in the bringing back. So they're different, but both will, let's say in the 10-year time horizon, think you'll see a big shift upward in both.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah. I think for a startup, yeah, as I just mentioned, different manufacturing services, vendors all over the world, because we are super cost sensitive and efficiency prone. So we check out all the solutions out there, and then because of how globalization has been developing all these years, so it's like e-commerce, internet, global, cross-border shipping, logistics, everything. Those are infrastructures existed there already for everyone, including us startups. So in terms of the services that we look for, whether it's technology consulting services or it's manufacturing services, we identify global, the optimal solutions globally, and then we use them. So I think that's how we actually benefit from where we are today. And in terms of innovation, I think the nature of startups is really, when you think how startups happened, how a group of people decided to either left their research jobs or left their previous big company jobs and started or created any new ventures. The strongest reason or motivation is always because that we see or we saw some issues there. It's so painful for us to see that we have to solve it. And we believe we have better solutions than all the existing solutions to everyone else. And a lot of the solutions probably already provided by big players, existing companies. So startups existed because we wanted to come up with new solutions and wanted to be better. So that comes with efficiency. And if it's indeed efficient enough, then there will be, this company will survive, will keep growing, and then into something bigger. So on this note, a startup has to keep innovating and always on survival mode, and how to think about challenges will be quite different.
Great. Yeah, beautiful. Did you want, Minister Sun, do you want to also comment on these issues, or otherwise, I know there's 3 more questions, so.
Well, very briefly, I can empathize with the concern about many jobs being taken over by robots. But I think that, for jobs where we think might be at risk of being taken over by automation or by robotics, for every job like that, there will also be jobs that very much need humans, and for which right now there might be a shortage of skilled manpower who can fulfill that role. I mean, think about healthcare, think about social care. If you live in an aging society, I think this is an even more acute issue. So I think that where Singapore sees a lot of promise in is in terms of supporting people who wish to change professions, who need to reskill, who need to upskill. Just now I talked about Skills Future, but we've also been investing in programs that help people convert from one industry sector to another, and also to help cushion the impact on mid-career people, and to perhaps lower some of the costs and concerns that businesses have about hiring people who are switching track. So I feel that that's always something for which there is a need, and I see a lot of room for policy innovation there as well.
Fantastic, very good. So what I'd like to do is, I saw 1, 2, 3 questions. If you could briefly state your questions, and then we'll respond to them together, but I want to pre-warn the panelists. We're going to end then, and I'm going to ask you if there's an opportunity, a missing opportunity for the future in terms of partnerships together. It doesn't mean, could be bilaterally or otherwise, so we'll end on that. Great.
I'm Greg Mulholland from Citrine Informatics. It seems like the question of production is a series of coupled principal agent problems where you have folks early in the value chain who are trying to influence folks further up the value chain. How do you think about that as Dow or Infosys that might be able to move across the whole value chain to influence behavior from both sort of the fundamental materials standpoint to the final produced product, and avoid the sort of short-term optimization of every player along that value chain?
Great. And here?
Thank you very much. I'm from the Ministry of Commerce of Thailand. My question is a little bit different. I have one question for Dr. Zhang, which I was very much impressed by your presentation. And my question is that in order for a startup in technology area in small developing countries such as Thailand, what kind of ecosystem would be needed, and what kind of policy that would help us? You just said that one thing that we have to do is we have to keep innovating. We as smaller countries, I hope that will be that. But how to do that in your view? My second question is pretty general. Whoever will be happy to answer. The theme of this entire seminar is about inclusive growth, but I haven't heard much about how technology advancing is going to help and bridge the gap between the technology haves and technology haves not. I think this is very important because for other countries, developing countries to catch up, we need to find a way to address this gap. Thank you.
Beautiful. And last.
Osman Okay from Kale Group, Istanbul, Turkey. My question is also on the unemployment problem of Industry 4.0. Minister Sim told that there will be jobs for people still, with Industry 4.0, but more skilled jobs, more qualified jobs. My question is actually, the alignment, time-wise. Are we, the world, is the world going to be aligned time-wise, between educating the labor force and implementing Industry 4.0? And if not, what will be the social problems that will come with it? Thank you.
Thank you. So we have very little time, about 1 minute for each of you. And the questions have been fantastic. So I'm just briefly, well, actually, I'll assume that you each heard of them to save time.
Yeah, very briefly, relative to the question asked here, when you're working with value chains and all the different partners in a value chain, because of competition, you can sometimes end up optimizing each piece. And I think it's really, and that's a good thing to do too, but if you're trying to develop breakthrough across a value chain, I think you have to have a framework that allows it. And I think that's an area that government has a key role in. If there are policy objectives that a country or a world is trying to reach, then you can work on things in a less competitive environment. Just very briefly on this point about re-education, Dow's been extremely active locally at multiple sites at trying to help people who have lost roles retool, re-educate, and get new roles, primarily in technical STEM areas. But I think we really need to, again, from a collaboration point of view, think as a community about the needs for retraining. That's probably less focused upon than STEM education in general. And we're going to go through many transitions here in the next decade. So I think this area and partnering across all the sectors, thinking about retraining is going to be pretty important.
Fantastic.
To the point about value chains and optimizing across bigger parts of the value chain, I think that it is inevitable because technology, digital technology is connecting endpoints, connecting dots better than it ever has. So if you look at when you get a ride on Didi or Uber, that ride is immediately visible. And every aspect of that ride is visible, whereas if you look at physical products, for example, this bottle of water, you generally don't know that this bottle of water was opened at this time and in this place and who opened it and so forth. So it is inevitable that the more that technology connects the world, the more that the value chain is based on that visibility and that connectivity, the more economic value there is in that, and opacity will be replaced by transparency as the world becomes more connected.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I just want to respond from RoboTerra perspectives. So we started from Silicon Valley, literally my own garage, and then grow into through incubator programs, and then keep growing. Today became a 70 people company. And now we have teams in both U.S. and China, and also working in those markets, and also serving many other partners from other countries as well. I think what we saw definitely are benefiting us is the most important factors for the success of startups, definitely talents, the people. Whether you actually started by having the right founding team members who knows what it takes to get anything off the ground to really deliver it, and then being able to go through all the challenges wherever you're starting a company, all the challenges and issues, and then just solve all the problems that what will happen all the time. But meanwhile, at the same time, for being in the U.S. and China, we of course are sitting on the largest two markets that we're able to reach out to, and also the talents or the team that we're making is able to serve those big markets, which gave us high growth that we'll be enjoying in those past time. So I think, for example, for actually a wonderful country like Thailand, also you have the unique geo-positioning, and also the many different languages you speak. I think that means diversity in a team if startups are being formed there, and positive company policies, pro-innovation, pro-startups can definitely help as well. That's what we also learned by having teams in China. There are just so many government programs, for example, to support us to bring overseas talents back to China, and then there will be tax benefits back to the company to support us doing so, or there will be special talent subsidies provided by the company for us to bring talents. All these are, of course, benefits a startup want to tap on, and that's very helpful. And on a very last note, as actually the minister mentioned, the mindset, I think it's so important. So again, I think for citizens of any, from any countries, if they believe that now with the internet, with the phone, you have access to the information about the markets, about the demands from global market, and you dare to dream about it. And then I think all the infrastructures of how you sell your products, your services, has already been here, available for everyone. So if people have the mindset, I think startups from everywhere can enjoy this global opportunity. That's our feeling.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Please.
We look forward to competitive industries, competitive companies, but I think it's important that individuals also be competitive in a fast-changing world. So I think in response to some of the comments raised from the floor, that education and skills training, I think that remains a no-regrets move. That helps people be more ready for the changes in the workplace, many of which we cannot fully anticipate now. And I think that really is a very concrete way of ensuring that people are able to access those good jobs that are being created because of technology.
Fantastic. So coming to my promised last question, can you speak to a key request you might have to one of each other, or more broadly, to a key collaborative partnership that is needed, whether that be with other governments and the details thereof for this future that we're moving into? So what key partnership is needed to be created that we don't yet have right now, or what's a key ask of one of each other for a partnership?
This is kind of really big, but
narrow.
Yeah, I won't talk that long. But the Sustainable Development Goals, as a set of goals, are really guideposts for what this planet and our global society need to achieve. And I think we need to find ways to collaborate across sectors in order to make headway on those goals. And I know there are objectives out there to do that, and that's the bigness. But I think we need to do that also on a smaller scale, where we do have influence at a country, from a company, and really try to have dialogue so that we're making small actions that add up to big changes in those goals.
Beautiful. Could Infosys respond to Dow's challenge of meeting sustainable
Absolutely.
goals?
Absolutely, yeah. We do that in our work, in enabling our clients to do sustainable work, as well as in our own facilities. We have the one of the largest groups of LEED Platinum buildings, and we'll be, by next year, completely will be carbon neutral. We already have in our Hyderabad campus in India, we have zero power coming from the grid. We, in fact, give back to the grid on most days. So I think this is something that we are absolutely committed to. But I think the point that Mr. Hawkins is making is beyond the sustainability itself, but into groups of people coming together and collaborating. And I think we have to realize that when we collaborate, we become more powerful. I think the more that we focus our competitive tendencies on the past, and the more that we collaborate, the better off we will all be.
Right.
But to your point about my thing, I think my request would be make something, and if we are already making something, then help teach how to make something or set up a makerspace. And if you're already doing that, then help set policies and create an environment where it is possible for people to make things.
Beautiful. Thank you. Do you have a partnership request or of one of the partners here in the room, or more broadly?
I think it's more broadly. Actually, one comment today is that all companies will be a technology company. Just want to further on that. I think it's been happening that every company will eventually become a data company. What insights or what values you can create based on the data you have about the products or service or the users that you've been serving. So, and data, there are many issues and challenges about data, security, regulations, who should use it, how to share about that, because values actually comes on to that, right? So I think, yeah, I'm in some way I'm calling that I hope policymakers, big companies, and also just startup innovators should all pay attention to this and participate in this, because we are indeed entering in an era that's both exciting, but also with many challenges that we have to face together. So yes, collaboration is definitely needed.
Great. Do you have a partnership request of others in the room, or can you respond most specifically to Dow's suggestion of a sustainability partnership?
I have many partnership requests because
specific ones.
Because I think that with the speed at which technology is moving, industry is changing, the feedback that I get from so many stakeholders, including entrepreneurs, including business owners, is that they want to be more in touch with each other. And I think the same goes for governments and public sectors as well, because only when information and ideas and thoughts are exchanged very regularly and very intentionally that you can see very innovative policies take shape that support further innovation in terms of industry and business. And I think that likewise, very good ideas that are being piloted in various industries can then also find their way towards widespread rollout and implementation in various societies. So I think the partnership ask really is we should all stay in touch.
Beautiful. So I want to thank everyone here for coming today. We've heard, I think, incredible opportunities in terms of partnerships around the future of work and around sustainability, and have had a wonderful panel. I'm also supposed to make sure you're aware of the robot makerspace between Carnegie Mellon and Infosys, which is on the mezzanine level, where you can interactively and experientially design, build, and experiment with hand-raised robots. And then also, there will be a future of production session by Carnegie. They told me to say this, I swear, by Carnegie Mellon on the 29th at 10:45 a.m. And we hope to see you there. So thank you, everyone, for coming and for the fantastic questions. Thank you.